Hey everyone, thank you for being here. Just wanted to let you know that we will get started in a few minutes. All right, good morning, everybody. It is 10:01, so we are starting just 1 minute behind schedule here. Thank you all for being here this morning. This is our long-awaited A&P all-in-one webinar. So I'm so happy that you are all here this morning, and I hope you are eager to have a crash course in anatomy and physiology today. Now, before we start any content, I want to talk about what we offer here at Archer Review. We are here for you at the start of your pre-nursing journey, all the way through nursing school and through passing your NCLEX. So it's a pretty special thing that we offer here at Archer Review, and I just want to reference what all we offer. So besides the free live webinars, which you are attending now, we also offer a very large question bank to help you prepare for your TEAS test. We have on-demand videos, which are all of the different topics covered in each of your units, but on a much more in-depth level. And what's nice about the on-demand videos, you can play them to your liking. So you can pause, you can speed up, you can repeat certain segments that you need as a learner. And so the on-demand videos are a great way to help you prepare for your TEAS test. Beyond the question bank, the videos, and the webinars, we also offer tutoring. So you can do tutoring one-on-one, or you can do tutoring as a small group. Just checking the chat here. Okay, people are logging in and able to hear and able to see. Awesome. Let's keep moving on. So we are going to go ahead and start with general knowledge for anatomy and physiology. And general knowledge is all about speaking a common language. So imagine you are a nurse, So imagine you are a nurse in the OR, the operating room, and you have a patient, and everybody's around the patient working at different positions or different angles. And let's say the surgeon says, make an incision to the right of the heart. But in which direction is right? Everybody's facing a different direction, has a different viewpoint. Is it the patient's right? Is it your right as the nurse? So everybody has to have a common language that they need to be able to speak and understand so that the patient gets the best care. So today we're going to talk about anatomical position, anatomical planes, and directional terms, all a part of that common language. With anatomical position, you have to understand the standard posture. So see the figure over here on the right. The standard posture is used as a reference in the medical and scientific fields. Notice how the individual is standing upright. Their feet are together and they are parallel. The arms are at their sides and those palms are facing forward. So your thumbs are pointing outwards. And the head and the eyes are directed straight ahead. All of these characteristics are what make up the standard anatomical position. The left and the right are always from the patient's perspective. And the purpose of this is to ensure that medical professionals and researchers can accurately communicate findings or carry out procedures without that confusion, without being that nurse in the OR that's, okay, to who's right, the patient's or mine? We now know that it's always from the patient's perspective. Anatomical planes are ways to divide up portions of the human body. Notice how the frontal plane divides the front half of the patient from the back half. The sagittal plane separates in a vertical direction, so it will separate the patient's right half from the left half. And finally, the transverse plane will separate the upper half from the lower half. And other directional terms that go with those planes and procedures. If you hear the word anterior or ventral, these are synonymous. That means towards the front of the body. See that green box there labeled anterior or ventral. It's towards the front of the patient's body. Opposite of that then is posterior or dorsal. Those are also synonymous. And a helpful hint to help you remember that, think of like a dorsal fin on the dolphin. It's on that back side of the organism. So the posterior or dorsal term means back of the body. Superior or cranial means towards the head, and cranial is a term for head, so that makes sense. And then the opposite of that term is inferior or caudal, which means towards the feet. Medial is a term one would use when they mean towards the midline of the body, towards the midline, towards the middle. Versus lateral, which is going to mean away from the midline of the body, moving outwards. And then our final set of directional terms, proximal versus distal. You can see on the figure here, proximal means closer to the point of attachment, whereas distal is farther away from the point of attachment. So let's do a quick check on your understanding. I'm going to go ahead and give you 2 minutes to answer 2 questions, and my reasoning for this is, on the TEAS, there are 18 anatomy and physiology questions, and when you break down the time limit, you have just over a minute to answer each question. And so I'm going to do the same thing on this webinar. I'm going to give you just over a minute to answer each question that I ask. And since we have 2 questions here, I'll give you just about 2 minutes to answer these. I'll follow back up with you in 2 minutes. Go ahead and take your time. Awesome. I see people starting to share their answers in the chat. Keep in mind that I can see your answers, but nobody else can, so it's a safe space for you to share what you think. Give you about 15 more seconds to wrap up your thoughts. All right, let's talk about question number 1. The question says, the transverse plane separates the body into, is it A, the left and right halves, B, the upper and lower halves, C, the front and back halves, or D, equal halves? Let's go ahead and see. The correct answer is B for all of those. I think everybody that I'm seeing so far chose B. Awesome job for your first question. The transverse plane separates the body into the upper and lower halves. Option A is incorrect. The left and right halves is that sagittal plane. Option C, the front and back halves. Remember, you hear that word front, like frontal. So that frontal plane is for front and back, but we wanted to figure out transverse plane. So C is incorrect. And D is also incorrect, equal halves. That doesn't have a specific plane term to it. So D is also ruled out. Let's move on to question 2. Which of the following is correct based on anatomical terms? Is it A, the ankle is the most proximal joint to the hip on the lower limb? B, the elbow is superior to the neck? C, thoracic vertebrae are superior to cervical vertebrae? Or D, the thumb is lateral to the pinky? Our correct answer here is D. The thumb is lateral to the pinky. Remember, lateral is the outermost portion that's opposite of medial toward the midline. Option A is incorrect because proximal is near the point of attachment, and so the knee would be the most proximal joint to the hip, not the ankle. That would be distal. Option B is incorrect because superior means higher, and so the elbow is certainly not higher than regards to your neck on your entire being. And finally, option C is also incorrect. Cervical vertebrae are the uppermost vertebrae. They would be superior. So D is the final answer. Good job to those who chose both B and D. All right, the body can be divided up into 6 major regions. We've got the head, the neck, upper limbs, the torso, the pelvis, and lower limbs. And I got a whole bunch of visuals here to show you those different regions. And notice how many different points and terms there are to know and to memorize. If you've taken anatomy and physiology before, you know it is a heavy, heavy course with memorization of all the different parts of the body. What's good about understanding anatomical regions is, let's zoom in on cervicals, since we just had that in a previous question. Cervical is going to be a term used for anything in that neck region. So when we talk about cervical vertebrae, for example, understanding the regional terms correlates into all other topics in anatomy. And so understanding all anatomical terms and planes, directions, positions is really essential and crucial for your access in anatomy and physiology. All right, guys, we're moving into Unit 2 for A&P, our respiratory system. And I want to mention this webinar is an A&P crash course. By no means are we going to get into all of the details that you need to be the most successful learner. So in order for you to be your best, to rock the A&P TEAS section, make sure that you consider joining us at Archer Review so you have access to those on-demand videos where we can go into the regions, the respiratory system, everything in A&P at a much more detailed level. And you have access to tons of awesome questions to help you prepare. So again, this is just quick surface level stuff, but we're going to go ahead and move on with the respiratory system because we have a lot to learn today. All right. The respiratory system structure and function. As I talk my way through these structures and function, I want you to take a big deep breath in with me, because as you breathe in, we're going to follow the trail of that breath, talking about those structures in that correct order. So as you take a deep breath in right now, the breath is immediately going towards the back of your throat, whether you breathed in through your mouth or your nose. And the back of your throat is called the pharynx. And this allows for that air from either your nose or your mouth to pass eventually down into your lungs. So the pharynx is that first stop. Moving away from the pharynx then, and more inferior, so further down from the pharynx, you hit the neck structure called the larynx, also known as your voice box. The larynx helps to keep food and drink out of the next structure called the trachea. This is your windpipe, the trachea, and you don't want any food or drink getting down into your windpipe because you can end up with things like pneumonia. It's not supposed to be in your lungs. So the larynx helps to keep food and drink out of the trachea, and the trachea is that long windpipe made up of cartilage, and it's a tube for air to eventually reach the lungs. So coming off of the trachea, we've got that first substructure in the lungs called the bronchi. The bronchi is that first division that's going to split the lungs in either the left or the right side. After the bronchi are the bronchioles, and these are a series of tubules that delivers air to the final stop, known as the alveoli. The alveoli, these little clusters, they almost look like clusters of grapes. This is the site for gas exchange. Only this structure right here is where gas exchange will occur, in the alveoli. So we got the pharynx, followed by the larynx, down through the trachea tube, into the bronchi, into the bronchioles, until it finally hits the alveoli, the site for gas exchange. Let's do a quick check on your understanding so far. What is that correct pathway of air coming into your respiratory system? And if you need to, take a deep breath. Maybe that will help your brain remember that order. It's one question this time, so I'm going to give you 1 minute to answer. Feel free to share in the chat so only I can see it, and in 1 minute we'll talk about it. All right, that is 1 minute. I had someone in the chat ask about, will this Zoom be uploaded to Archer? Yes, I believe so, it will be. So hopefully you can go back and replay and pause to the pace that suits your needs. Because again, I know this is fast. But according to the chat, guys, you're all rock stars because I don't see a single wrong answer so far. So the correct answer, as you guys all have guessed, is A, the pharynx, followed by the larynx, down into the trachea, into those bronchi dividing the left and right sides, into the bronchioles, and finally the alveoli. Awesome job, everybody. I want to take a greater detailed look at gas exchange because that's the whole point of the respiratory system, right? Is to exchange gases in your lungs. And so those alveoli, we have a much better picture here, all blown up for you. See how they're in clusters. This helps to expand surface area. And with greater surface area, you have greater amounts of gas exchange. And the gas exchange that is occurring is in two directions. You want to inhale oxygen so that that oxygen can get to your blood and be delivered to cells so you can make energy and do all great things that life entails. But in exchange, your cells, when they produce energy, they give off a waste, which is carbon dioxide. And that carbon dioxide is certainly waste, guys. If that builds up in your body, it's toxic. And so you have to get that out. And so the alveoli, that site for gas exchange, will bring in oxygen and trade it out for that carbon dioxide waste, diffusing back out. Two questions here to check on your understanding again. So I will go ahead and give you 2 minutes to tackle questions 1 and 2. Question 1 says, the body exchanges what gases in the lungs? And question 2 says, where does that gas exchange occur? So 2 minutes and I'll check back in with you. All right, everybody, let's talk about question number 1. The body exchanges what gases in the lungs? And the correct answer here, as everybody guessed again, the option is C, oxygen and carbon dioxide. Now, I want to mention the other gases, nitrogen and hydrogen here, because we do inhale nitrogen. We do. And in trace amounts, we inhale hydrogen. Except the difference with those gases is those gases are not actively reacting, therefore not a part of the respiratory system. So the oxygen and the carbon dioxide are those two gases. Great job to those who chose option C. Question 2, where does gas exchange occur? It occurs in the alveoli, those clusters with maximum surface area for maximum gas exchange. So the correct answer there is B. Remember, option A, the trachea is the windpipe. It carries the gases to and from the lungs. The bronchi are those first tubes that divide the lungs from the left and the right, and the bronchioles, just more smaller tubes, but they all eventually reach the alveoli. That is the site for gas exchange. The respiratory system does not work in isolation. As we just talked about, the gases have to be able to diffuse into the blood or out of the blood and back to the lungs. And so there is a heavy relationship between the respiratory system and the cardiovascular system. Because of that dependence on the blood supply near those air sacs or those alveoli for those gases to exchange in and out. And just a reminder, the blood will load up on oxygen, deliver it to all parts of the body, and in exchange, the blood gets rid of or expels carbon dioxide, giving it back to the lungs so that you can exhale and get it out of your body. Let's take a moment to review the key topics from the respiratory system. The respiratory system's role is to regulate gas exchange. You inhale oxygen for cell respiration, and that's just a cellular process for making energy. And you exhale carbon dioxide as a waste. The respiratory system is made up of the following structures, and I put them in the order of taking a breath. So the pharynx, followed by the larynx, then the trachea, into the bronchi, the bronchioles, and finally the alveoli. And the respiratory system highly depends on and affects other organ systems. So that wraps up the respiratory system. If you need more detail, or if you need to kind of tailor this lesson to make it your own, check out those on-demand videos we offer at Archer. And to follow up one more time with the question about will this webinar be posted, I got a final confirmation that yes, it will be available on our Facebook group and over on our YouTube channel. So if you need to pause it or come back to another time, feel free to go to those two areas and check it out. We're going to move on because this is a crash course anatomy physiology webinar. And so we're moving on to the cardiovascular system, again, just covering surface level knowledge. Within the cardiovascular circulation, the whole point of that circulation is to transport waste, hormones, nutrients, and antibodies, etc., all throughout the body. So think of the cardiovascular system like a transportation system, like a highway system, all throughout your body, transporting things that it needs and things that it doesn't need, like waste. The cardiovascular system is a closed system, and it contains a pump, and that pump is your heart. Now, there are two different types of circulations within that closed system, and we'll talk more about that on the next couple of slides. And making up that pump, or your heart, there are 4 chambers. Humans have 4 chambers to their hearts. We have 2 atria and 2 ventricles. And also in that cardiovascular system, it's not just a pump. The pump's got to pump the blood somewhere. And that transportation mechanism are all of those blood vessels. And those can come in the form of arteries, which carry blood away from the heart. veins, which carry blood towards the heart, and capillaries, which are really, really small vessels found in other parts of your body. So with normal pulmonary circulation, remember how I said there are two types of circulation in the cardiovascular circulatory system. Right now, we're going to talk about the pulmonary circulation. And if you know anything about root words, or maybe you've taken a medical terminology class, if you haven't, highly recommend that. If you recognize this root word pulm, pulm means lung. And so when we talk about pulmonary circulation, we're talking about blood that's being circulated through the heart and going to the lungs. And the whole goal for this circulation is for the blood to get oxygenated. Doesn't that make sense? If the blood's going to go to the lungs provides oxygen, that gas exchange we just talked about. So the goal for the patient's right side of the body that carries out pulmonary circulation is to get that blood rich in oxygen. And it will go through a series of structures in a very specific pathway in order to meet that goal. First, blood enters in through two different vena cavas, veins, major veins here. And after it goes to the vena cava, it dumps into the right atrium, that upper right chamber of the heart. The blood then flows through a valve on the right side of our patient. That is the tricuspid valve. And then finally down into the right ventricle. And then it kind of takes a turn, this blood, due to the closed system and the pumping and the pressure. The blood shoots back up and it goes in through another valve called the pulmonary semilunar valve. Notice we've got that term pulm there again because you know it's on its way to the lungs. Once it passes through the pulmonary semilunar valve, into the pulmonary artery it goes until it finally reaches the lungs. And now that blood gets rich on oxygen, it's delivered to the rest of the body, but because we know about gas exchange, in return, the blood is loading up on carbon dioxide. And that's a waste product that is toxic to your body if we don't get rid of it. And so thanks to our circulatory system, that transportation system, it's going to pump that blood around some more so we can get rid of that CO2, bring it back to the lungs so you can exhale it. So how does it do that? It uses the left side of our patient's heart. So one more time, the left side of the patient's heart is going to deliver that depleted oxygen, but then also high in CO2 back to the body. Sorry, excuse me, I had a moment there. And this is called the systemic circulation. So the blood comes in through the pulmonary veins. So blood leaving the lungs comes in through the pulmonary veins, and then it will go into the left atrium. It will flow down into that valve on the left side of our patient called the mitral valve, and then into the left ventricle. And then remember, it takes that turn after leaving the ventricle, and it will go into the aortic semilunar valve because this blood has to flow into the aorta, which is a major artery carrying blood away from the heart. So we can deliver that rich oxygenated blood coming from the lungs to the rest of the body. So it goes into the aorta to be delivered to the rest of the body. Oh no. All right, guys, 2 questions to check in on your understanding, and it looks like I left a check here on question 2 that was already revealed to you. So hopefully if you haven't seen it yet, maybe you can just cover it up quick, but we'll talk about it either way. Question 1 and 2, I will give you 2 minutes to talk about or to think about these 2 questions. Question 1 is the left atrium receives blood from the what structure? The left atrium will receive blood from which structures? Question 2 is, which of the following is part of the pulmonary circulation? So which structures are a part of pulmonary circulation? I'll give you 2 minutes. Goodness gracious. Sorry guys, I'm trying to drag all my moving parts around and instead I'm revealing another answer. About 1 more minute. All right, guys, let's talk about question number 1. The left atrium receives blood from the, and if you weren't watching the screen right away, hopefully you had a fair chance to answer that at your own. I'm sorry, I apologize. Got a lot of moving parts here, and it's my first webinar, so hopefully I didn't reveal it for too many of you. The correct answer is D, the pulmonary veins. Remember, the left side of our patient's heart is going to be receiving blood from the lungs. And so the vessels that deliver the blood from the lungs are veins. And since it's coming from the lungs, we've got the word pulmonary there. So pulmonary veins, option D, is the correct answer. Question number 2, which of the following is part of the pulmonary circulation system? And the correct answer here, unfortunately, was revealed for you already. I'll do a better job to make sure that those checks are unchecked next time. The correct answer here is the superior vena cava. Remember, with pulmonary circulation, this is the right side of the heart, and the goal here is to send blood to the lungs. It's low on oxygen, and it's got to go to the lungs, so it's pulmonary circulation. And the veins, the vena cavas, superior and inferior, will bring the blood into the heart in order to start that pulmonary circulatory system. And so that rules out the mitral valve. The mitral valve is a valve on the patient's left side of the heart, and that's not a part of pulmonary circulation. The left atrium and the left ventricle, again, on the left side of the patient, and that's the systemic circulation, delivering the oxygenated blood to the body. It's not depleted blood that needs to go to the lungs. All right, since our system in the circulatory system is closed, that means that there is a pressure, because when you've got a closed system and fluid flowing through it, pressure exists, and that pressure may fluctuate depending on circumstances and when blood is being transported. And so we can measure the amount of pressure that exists in a patient's, in their vessels. So blood pressure is controlled by a natural pacemaker in the body. And that pacemaker is called the sinoatrial node. And I've got this dark black arrow referencing that yellow node there in the upper right side of the patient's heart. The sinoatrial node, we can also call it the SA node for short. That is the natural pacemaker. It will send electrical currents to other parts of the heart, leading to contractions. So when you've got ventricles contracting, those are those bottom two chambers. When those contract, it makes this lub sound. And when the top two chambers contract, those are known as the atria, those make a dub sound. And so sometimes you'll hear the blood pressure as a lub-dub sound. And you can measure those contraction phases. You measure the contraction phase pressure over the relaxed phase pressure. And so you've got the systole over the diastole. Typically that's about 120 over 8 or 120 over 80 for your blood pressure. And that's going to be your ventricles and atria contraction over top of that relaxation phase. Let's do one more check-in. What structure is known as the pacemaker in the heart, controlling those heart contractions? I'll give you 1 minute to think about your answer for this question. Okay, the structure known as the pacemaker in the heart, controlling all heart contractions, is the sinoatrial node, or the SA node. The option A, atrioventricular node, is another node involved with heart contractions, but it carries an electrical signal a little more downstream. That's something that we would definitely dive into and talk about in our on-demand videos, but that atrioventricular node is not the natural pacemaker. B, the mitral valve, is a valve within the heart separating two different chambers. It's not involved in heart contractions. And the same goes for option D, the tricuspid valve. So the logical answer here is C. Let's do a quick review of the cardiovascular system. The heart is four-chambered and it is a closed pump. It circulates blood so that it can take in nutrients and oxygen, immune cells, while removing waste, such as carbon dioxide. Pulmonary circulation delivers oxygen depleted blood to the lungs so it can get filled up on oxygen. And as soon as that's done, the blood's got to go back to the heart so we can deliver that oxygen-rich blood to the body, and that's called systemic circulation, until your body uses all that oxygen again and it's low on oxygen, and then we send it back to the heart. It's one big cycle. The blood circulates with a force known as pressure, and we can measure that pressure when the heart muscle contracts versus when the heart muscle is relaxed. And all of those contractions are controlled by a natural pacemaker called the sinoatrial node. All right, that wraps up the cardiovascular system. Next up, we move into the digestive system. And remember, this is surface level knowledge. Let's go ahead and start. The digestive system is the process by which food and drink are broken down into smaller molecules, so you can absorb all the good things that come from your food into the bloodstream, and it can be used by the body for energy, growth, and repair. There's two different types of digestion. You can have mechanical digestion or chemical digestion. Mechanical digestion means physical breakdown of food. You're not really changing the composition, what it's made up of. You're just changing its form. So thinking about chewing a juicy cheeseburger right now in your mouth. You're just taking a big bite and chomping it down into smaller bits. And as I said, that begins in the mouth. And it continues all the way into the stomach with muscle contractions. And the point of mechanical digestion is to increase surface area. If you have smaller particles, you have more exposure for the absorption of nutrients into the body. But mechanical digestion is not the only way that we break down our food to get all the nutrients from it. We have to have chemical digestion too. And this is the chemical breakdown of food. So we are changing the composition. It's not just a physical change, it's a chemical change. And this also begins in the mouth. Your saliva, which holds a bunch of different types of enzymes, help to begin that chemical breakdown process. The digestive system is made up of many structures, you guys, and we go into greater depths of all different structures here on our on-demand videos. For example, the small intestine, the large intestine, all of those have substructures within them. I'm keeping it surface level for this crash course right now, but please know that there is so much more to learn, and if you need access to that learning, check out more that we have to offer at Archer Review. So let's get started with the basics. If you take a bite of that juicy cheeseburger or whatever else suits your fancy, if you're not into a cheeseburger, I just want you to visualize it with me. First, that food starts off in your mouth, as we said, and immediately mechanical and chemical digestion begins happening, and it uses saliva to break down that food. You chew up your food and you go to swallow it. And that food goes through a tube called the esophagus that carries all of those goodies from your throat down to your stomach. Your stomach is one big muscle, and that will help to go through muscle contractions to further break down food. Once your stomach has done its job, it passes it off to the small intestine. And here in the small intestine, it digests a little bit more, but most importantly, we begin to absorb the nutrients from food. The small intestine is that first structure where you begin to absorb all the goodies from your food that you eat. Moving on to the large intestine, it absorbs some leftover vitamins, but also mainly your large intestine is going to absorb water, helping to create whatever is left into more of a solid form. And that solid form will be stored as waste in your rectum until you are ready to release it. And then the anus is the last stop of the digestive system, and this is where that waste is finally released out of the body. Let's take a moment to check in. Oh my goodness, I've got another check already revealed for you. I need to do a better job at those. Our two questions: what is the function of the small intestine? And two, what structure brings food and drink from the mouth to the stomach? Go ahead and give yourself 2 minutes and maybe cover up those checks if you need to. I'll check back in with you in 2 minutes. All right, that is 2 minutes. So the first question is, what is the function of the small intestine? And the correct answer for the small intestine is B, to absorb nutrients. Option A is incorrect. The chemical breakdown of food, that begins in the mouth and it continues into the stomach, not the function of the small intestine. Option C, absorb water, is the job of the large intestine. And finally, D, the storage of waste, is the job of the rectum. And so the small intestine, its major job is to absorb those nutrients. Good job to those who chose B. Question number 2, what structure brings food and drink from the mouth to the stomach? What structure connects the mouth to the stomach? And the correct answer is A, the esophagus. Remember, B, the small intestine, is to absorb nutrients. C, the large intestine, is to absorb some leftover nutrients, but mostly water. And the job of D, the anus, is to release waste out of the body. All right, guys, I have a question for you. Is having the red checks helpful for you when you can see that final answer, just in case you missed me verbally explaining it? Should I keep those red checks? Or I could do without and not run the risk of having those red checks exposed a little early. Just let me know if I should keep the red checks or I don't need the red checks in the chat. I would appreciate that feedback so much. Oh, everybody's saying keep. Awesome. Thank you, guys. I will do such a better job next time at making sure I check that animation tool so it's not revealed too early. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and move on. The digestive system works in tandem with many other body systems. For one, the cardiovascular system. We talked about that being the transportation system for all things that the body needs. So of course, there's a close relationship between the cardiovascular system and the digestive system, because the digestive system works so hard to break down and absorb all of those nutrients from the food that you use to nourish your body. But without the cardiovascular system, it doesn't go anywhere. So it heavily relies on the cardiovascular system to deliver everything to your cells so your body can produce energy, grow, and repair. The digestive system has a close relationship with the nervous system because the nervous system is going to control those muscle contractions in the stomach, for example, and it will help with secretions. We didn't talk about that in this webinar, but in our on-demand videos, I go into so much more detail about what things are secreted in the digestive system to help with that chemical breakdown. And the nervous system is going to be in charge of regulating that. And finally, the muscular system, because you've got smooth muscle, your stomach, in the digestive system, and its job is to move the food from, one organ to the next. So the muscular system is closely connected. It's actually directly involved with the digestive system. All right, we're making decent time. We've got just over an hour left. Let's review the digestive system and we'll move into our next topic. The digestive system breaks down and absorbs nutrients and water for growth, repair, and energy production. Digestion is made up of both chemical digestion and mechanical digestion. The digestive tract starts in the mouth, followed by the esophagus, down into the stomach, then into the small intestine, then into the large intestine, followed by the rectum, and it will exit through the anus. There is a cause and effect relationship with multiple other body systems. The digestive system depends on and influences other body systems. It cannot work alone. All right, we're at the nervous system, and notice how we are in Unit 5. There's a total of 12, and we've got just over an hour left. I will do my best to kind of keep pacing where it is right now. We may finish on time. We may not, and if we don't, I'll talk about that closer to the end of our 2 hours together. The nervous system mostly is made up of the brain, the spinal cord, and a whole bunch of nerves. And the function of your nervous system, the whole purpose of the nervous system, is to help all parts of the body communicate with each other. And to do so, the nervous system will receive information, whether that be, internally in your body or maybe externally outside of your body. And it determines where does that information need to go so that your body can properly respond to those signals. And all of that helps to maintain homeostasis, which is like an internal stability or balance. The nervous system can be broken down into two major parts. The central nervous system, which you may see referenced as CNS, or the peripheral nervous system, which you'll see referenced as the PNS. The central nervous system is made up of the brain and spinal cord. You see that highlighted in red in our graphic here. The brain and spinal cord. Central. Think medial, midline, central. Brain and spinal cord are found there. And this is the central command system. Then the peripheral nervous system are all of those nerves that branch throughout the body, branching off of the brain and the spinal cord. And once that central command system has received the signal, it knows the information, it sends that, like what your body needs to do through the nerves out to the rest of the parts of the body so that your body can carry out the overall function it needs to in order to respond to the proper signals. Now, the basic unit of your nerves is called a neuron. Think of it as like a singular unit, a cell almost. And the point of a neuron is to communicate, to send and receive information, just as we said the entire point of the nervous system is. But here at the microscopic level, looking at the neuron itself is where that communication occurs. So the neuron is made up of 5 major parts that we'll talk about today. Number 1, I have labeled. We'll call that area the cell body, and it's going to contain organelles and the nucleus for that neuron. Around the cell body, labeled number 2, are called dendrites, and these are fibers that carries information towards the cell body. Think of them almost like tentacles or feelers that sense and carry that information towards the cell body, towards the nucleus. Number 3 is called the axon. Notice how it's this long strand coming off of the cell body. And it's a long strand because it's a fiber that carries information away from the cell body, until it hits number 4, which is called the axon terminals. And these are kind of tentacled looking things again, but the job of the axon terminals is to take that information and send it off to other cells. And finally, structure number 5 is the myelin sheath, and it's going to wrap around the axon length to insulate and protect that axon, because we're carrying signals over a good length, and we want to make sure that that integrity of the signal is intact. We don't lose the intensity of the signal or the message of the signal. And so the axon has its own covering for protection called the myelin sheath until that signal reaches the axon terminal, where we then relay that information to the next cell. It's like one giant game of telephone from one neuron to the next. Okay, questions 1 and 2. And I must have just had an overall feature where question 2 answers will just always be revealed. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Question 1, what is the function of the peripheral nervous system? And question 2, what structure of a neuron carries the signal along the entire length of the neuron? So take 2 minutes. We'll talk about the answers in 2 minutes. All right, question 1, what is the function of the peripheral nervous system? The correct answer for question 1 is B. The peripheral nervous system carries signals to the body and back again. Option A can't be correct. The command center is the central nervous system. Option C contracts muscles. This could be a very specific function of the peripheral nervous system. However, it is not the overall function. It could just be one specific signal that the peripheral nervous system sends and receives, but it sends and receives so many other signals. So the general function of the PNS carry all signals to the body and back again. And then option D, process sensory information and generate those motor responses. That is the job of the central nervous system, to process, make a decision, carry that information to the peripheral nervous system. So option B is correct. Question 2, what structure of a neuron carries the signal along that entire length of the neuron? The correct answer is A, the axon. Remember, B, the axon terminal, are the end pieces of that neuron, and the axon terminal will carry the signal from the one cell to another cell, to a neighboring cell. C, the myelin sheath, is to surround and protect the axon, so it is not directly involved with carrying the signal. It just wraps itself and protects the part that does carry the signal, which is the axon itself. And finally, D, the cell body, is incorrect. It does not carry the signal along the entire length of the neuron because the cell body is not the entire length itself. The cell body is on one end of the neuron, and it holds those organelles and the nucleus. When it comes to the nervous system, it needs to be able to communicate, to send and receive information. And so cell communication can be broken down into, I've got here 5 very simplified steps. This process is certainly a process that goes into so much detail. And again, you can find that information in our on-demand videos. This is just a quick outline of what cell communication looks like from one nerve cell to the next. So first, the electrical signal is received by the dendrites. Electrical signal is received. If that signal is strong enough, it will travel down the axon, that length of the neuron, until it hits those axon terminals. And from here, that signal will leave the axon terminal, and it's released and will jump the gap to the neighboring cell, the next door neuron, where that signal is received, and that signal binds to the neighboring cell, and it just continues to be passed from one neuron to the next until the destination has been reached and the action is carried out. So think about a classic example of this is like putting your hand on like a hot stove. Maybe you didn't know the burner was on. You touch it, and in a split second, your body senses it's too hot. It sends that signal to the brain using all of these steps, repeated from one neuron to the next. And your brain says, this isn't safe. Contract your muscles, move your bones, get your finger off that stove top. And so it relays that information back down to your hand until you pull your hand back up. But all of that happens in a fraction of a second. Your body is capable of such amazing things before you even have time to think about it. And breaking it down here into 5 simple steps just doesn't do it justice. So make sure you go ahead and check out those on-demand videos. But that's just a quick review of it. So let's review the nervous system all together. The nervous system is made up of the brain, the spinal cord, and nerves, and it can be divided into 2 major parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. A neuron, which is the basic unit, a nervous system cell, is made up of a cell body, dendrites, an axon terminal, and a myelin sheath. And finally, neurons use electrical signals to communicate from one neuron to another. All right, we are moving right into the muscular system. This is topic 6, so we are halfway through our A&P crash course. With your muscular system, it can be broken down into 3 different major muscle types. Your muscles can either be smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, or skeletal muscle. Cardiac muscle is involuntary, meaning you don't control it. And that's a pretty great thing, because think of how distracted we get day to day doing all the things. If you had to think about every time you had to make your heart beat, I'm not sure how long any of us would be alive for. So a cardiac muscle is involuntary. You do not control this muscle. It is a branching type structure within that muscle. And it's striated, meaning that it's got these stripes on the tissue. And cardiac muscle is found only in the heart, hence why it's got the term cardiac. It's unique just to the heart. Smooth muscle is also involuntary. You cannot control that. It is not striated, and it is found in the eyes, the skin, the reproductive tract, like our stomach we just mentioned, and walls of hollow organs. The third muscle type is the skeletal muscle. It's mostly voluntary. You have control over most of those movements. It is striated, meaning that it's going to have these stripes on the tissue. It is often attached to bone, and your skeletal muscle is involved in movement. And skeletal muscle is going to be our focus for the rest of this muscle crash course. First, let's differentiate between those 3. What muscle type would be involved in the muscle contractions of food and drink in the digestive system? Give yourself 1 minute to answer, and we'll talk about it in 1 minute. Awesome job to those participating. I'm seeing correct answers from everybody so far. So the muscle that would be involved in muscle contractions in the digestive system is C, smooth muscle. Remember, smooth muscle is going to make up your stomach, and it's going to be a part of those contractions to mechanically digest your food. Option A, cardiac muscle. It's only found in the heart. The heart is not involved with food or drink or in the digestive system. You can rule that one out pretty easily. Option B, the skeletal muscle will connect to bone and creates movement, not involved in food or drink either. And option D, striated muscle, would only be cardiac or skeletal. And neither one of those 2 choices are a part of the digestive system for reasons we just talked about. And that leaves option C, smooth muscle, to be the correct answer. Skeletal muscles, you've got about 700 of them that are named in your body, 700. And they together make up about half of your total body weight. And they typically work together in groups to help carry out or generate movement. And muscles are named based on 3 things: where they are located. This is where you got to remember those anatomical regions and terms, because it helps so much, especially with muscles, naming muscles. They're also named based on their shape and on their size. Most muscles are attached to bone, and when muscles are attached to bone, they are attached by a tendon. And muscles will contract and shorten in order to create that movement. And the movement is generated by these two small structures called actin and myosin inside of a sarcomere within units called myofibrils. That's a whole lot of terms I just threw at you. So I want to talk about this visual to break down all the different layers that your muscles are made up of. So see how we've got muscle attaching to bone on the far left. And when we look at the entire muscle itself, we can pull out a subunit within that muscle called a fascicle. And they're just groups of muscle fibers. So pull out one muscle fiber. That's what's in the green here. Muscle fibers are individual muscle cells grouped within that fascicle. Now, within those muscle fibers, you've got organelles called myofibrils. And see on the picture for myofibrils, we've got the dark gray structures on there. Within those dark gray structures, that's your contractile unit. That's the area you would want to zoom in on and focus and see these minute pieces called actin and myosin working together there to shorten and to carry out that overall contraction of the muscle. But you can see on this visual just how layered and organized your muscle tissue is. So here on this next slide, I've got a much better visual here for you to see those actin and myosin filaments working together. So many nerves and muscle fibers do work together in order for muscles to remove, and it's all fueled by energy, or you could get more specific and say ATP. The movement occurs when myosin and actin bind and slide past one another. So let's look at the two different phases. We've got a relaxed phase up top. The muscle is relaxed. Notice where actin and myosin are in relation to each other. The actin's on the far side and the myosin's still down the middle, but they're not overlapped. They're not sliding past each other right now. They're relaxed. Your muscle is expanded. But when the nervous system triggers the muscle to contract, take a look at what's different in that picture. The actin slides in between and over top of the myosin filaments. And that sliding over, the binding to each other, is the contraction of your overall muscle. So yeah, myosin and actin are the two at work here when it comes to muscle contraction. Okay, next question. The functional unit of a muscle is, give yourself 1 minute to review the functional unit of a muscle. All right, the functional unit of a muscle is C, the sarcomere. Options A and B are filaments that are involved with muscle contraction, but it is not the functional unit of the muscle itself. So you can rule myosin and actin out. And D, myofibrils, those are the organelles that contain the sarcomere, which will house the myosin and actin. But it is not the overall functional unit itself. So sarcomere is the correct answer, the functional unit of the muscle. Let's review the muscle system. There are over 700 muscles. They are named based on their location, their size, and shape. They generate movement by contracting and shortening. Muscles can be divided into 3 types: the cardiac muscle, smooth muscle, or skeletal muscle. And there's multiple levels of organization within those muscles. As you saw, there's a muscle fascicle, a muscle fiber, the myofibril, and then sarcomeres within the myofibrils. And the sarcomere is the functional unit of muscle. It contains the actin and myosin, which is necessary for muscle contraction. All right, we are moving right along into the reproductive systems. There's male and female. So the reproductive functions. For a female, the reproductive system, its whole purpose is to really do 5 different things. Create eggs, which we can call ovum for singular or an ova for plural. Fertilize that egg, implant that egg, go through gestation where you develop that egg into a fetus, and then finally birth a child. So a female reproductive system has 5 major components to it. Compared to the male reproductive system function, your job is to create and deliver sperm to the female egg for fertilization. For a female external anatomy, there are different external features that we will briefly talk about. First, the labia majora, known as the larger lips. These are the outermost folds that will protect all internal structures. Then we've got the labia minora. See how minora means smaller compared to majora, which is larger. These are the smaller lips, the labia minora. It encircles the clitoris, creating the hood. See that on the visual over to the right. You can see that hood structure. That is going to surround the clitoris, and it extends downward. The clitoris is homologous to the bulb of the penis in males, and it engorges with blood during intercourse. Another external feature is the urethra. This is the extension of a tube coming from the bladder to the external portion of your body that you would excrete waste from. And finally, we're going to talk about the vaginal opening, the vagina. It is used for sexual intercourse and for childbirth. For male external anatomy, males have a penis, which is the organ for sexual intercourse. Within that penis is a tube called the urethra, and this is the same, almost the same, I should say, to females. It's a tube that connects to the bladder, and that tube allows the male to excrete their waste, but the urethra will also carry sperm, and it allows for sperm to exit the body. Another external feature for the male reproductive system is the scrotum. The scrotum holds the testicles, which are situated behind the penis, and it contains nerves and blood vessels. Moving into the internal side for both male and female. So starting with female reproductive systems internally will hold ovaries. The ovaries are where the eggs are produced. Notice how on a female there are 2 ovaries typically. Followed by fallopian tubes. This is a tube that's going to connect to the ovary and delivers that egg down into the uterus. And since there are 2 ovaries, there are 2 fallopian tubes connecting each ovary to the uterus. And the uterus is the womb. It's where the baby grows and develops. The cervix maintains and protects the baby in the uterus, and it will eventually lead to the vagina. It will open up to the vagina for childbirth. And then the vagina itself is the canal connecting to the cervix to the external environment. That baby will exit during birth. Now, all of these structures and the actions that they carry out are regulated by hormones. For the male internal system, they have seminal vesicles. So go ahead and find that on the graphic. The seminal vesicles will make and store fluid, mostly a real sugary fluid, which is food for the sperm. The prostate, right underneath that seminal vesicle area, adds fluid, which is going to nourish sperm even more. The vas deferens is a tube that the sperm travels through when leaving the epididymis and going to the urethra. So the vas deferens is a tube, transports your sperm outside of the body. The testicles is the primary reproductive organ because the testicles not only makes testosterone, which is a hormone regulating all of these systems for males, but it also makes sperm. Testicles make the sperm. This is why it's the primary reproductive organ. And finally, the epididymis. This is the tube towards the back of the testicle. It holds the sperm and it aids in sperm development. Okay, questions 1 and 2. Question 1, if the vas deferens are cut during a vasectomy, what function does the patient lose? Question 2, which of the following reproductive structures do men and women share? Give yourself 2 minutes for these 2 questions. All right, that was 2 minutes. Question number 1, if the vas deferens are cut during a vasectomy, what function does the patient lose? The correct answer here is B. The sperm are no longer going to be released from the body. This is a lot of times an option for birth control for a male to cut those vas deferens so sperm will not be released from the body. So let's talk about the other options then. Option A, food is not made for the sperm. This is the job of the seminal vesicles. The seminal, All right, guys, my Zoom just said I was logged out, but it also looks like I'm still logged in. Can you guys give me some feedback in the chat if you can still hear me and if I'm still here for you? Oh, thank you for the quick feedback. I got so nervous. My Zoom just said I was logged out. Someone else is trying to sign in. All right, let's keep on going then. I'm here. We're good. Thank you. So option A, food is not made for the sperm. The job of the seminal vesicles will make the food for sperm, and that's not the structure that's being cut here. So we can rule A out. Option C, eggs are not delivered to the uterus. That is the job of the female reproductive system. The vas deferens in a vasectomy takes place in a male reproductive system. So we can rule C out. And then option D, sperm are not made at all. Well, the sperm are made in the testicles, and we are not doing anything to the testicles. We are going to go ahead and cut the vas deferens. And so that's just the tube that releases the sperm out of the body. So option B is correct. Question 2, which of the following reproductive structures do men and women share? The correct answer here is A. Both males and females have a urethra. Remember, this is going to be that tube that connects to your bladder, to the outer part of your body, which allows you to excrete your waste. The cervix is going to dilate and open up and protect baby in the uterus. That's a female reproductive structure. The seminal vesicles are also just a male reproductive structure. Those seminal vesicles are going to make the food for the sperm, not shared by both sexes. And finally, the labias, those are external female reproductive structures, only not shared by both males and females. So option A is the only structure shared by both. When fertilization is successful, when sperm has met the egg, it develops immediately into a structure which we call the zygote in the fallopian tube. And as time goes on, that zygote will undergo many, many, many cell divisions, which we call mitosis in the science world. And eventually that unit will implant into the uterus while it develops into a new structure called the embryo. So we went from a zygote into an embryo. And as the embryo continues to be nourished and grows and develops in that uterus, it will turn into a fetus. And after about 40 weeks of growth and development in the uterus, which we call gestation, baby will be birthed. The uterus contracts and the baby is pushed out through the vagina into the world. And if in the case that fertilization is unsuccessful, if that egg in the female is not successfully fertilized by sperm, the female body recognizes that, and it will eventually shed that entire lining of the uterus which holds that unfertilized egg, and that is the part of the menstruation cycle for a female. All right, let's review the reproductive system. They are regulated by hormones, and we didn't mention those hormones. Find those in our on-demand videos, but both male and female reproductive systems are highly regulated by hormones. The male reproductive system's purpose is to create and deliver sperm to the egg. And the male reproductive system is made up of the penis, urethra, prostate, vas deferens, epididymis, seminal vesicles, testicles, scrotum, and sperm. While female reproductive system, their purpose is to create eggs to be fertilized. And those systems are made up of the vagina, uterus, ovaries, cervix, fallopian tubes, the labias, the clitoris, and eggs. If an egg is not fertilized or implanted, the uterine lining is shed, contributing to menstruation. And if a fertilized egg is implanted, the cell undergoes many cell divisions and it grows and develops into a fetus in the woman's uterus. All right, moving on to the integumentary system. The integumentary system, you guys, it contains the largest organ. Mostly you would know it as your skin. Now your skin and some other pieces involved with that, but that's probably what you're most familiar with when I say integumentary system. Mostly your skin, your largest organ. It plays a vital role in protecting you, excretion, getting rid of things out of your body, and maintaining homeostasis with the environment and internally within yourself. So the integumentary system consists of skin, like I said, and you can break down the skin into 3 major layers. You can see those layers referenced on the far right of this picture. The outermost layer is the epidermis, followed by the dermis, which is going to be one more layer deeper inside. And the dermis, you can see here, since it's such a large unit of this picture, it houses hair follicles, sweat glands, and blood vessels. Followed by, at the base of all of this, the deepest level, the hypodermis, that third layer, the hypodermis. And you can see here in the visual, there's more glands and more blood. But the skin is not the only thing making up your integumentary system. Also making up that system are your hair, nails, and other glands like sweat glands, for example, or sebaceous glands, which is going to secrete oil. As I said, your integumentary system's one job is to protect. So protect from what? It's the first barrier to pathogens. It's your first line of defense. I don't know if you've ever thought about your skin in that way, but your skin is that first line of defense from pathogens being able to get inside of your body. It helps with moisture maintenance. Your skin is waterproof due to all of the old dead cells that get pushed up to the surface. And your skin contains melanocytes. So you see the word cyte, that means cell. And then melano is referring to melanin. And the melanin produced in your cells is going to protect your body from UV. UV, which can cause cancer, among some other ailments. Also, your nails are there to protect the tips of your fingers and your toes. So your integumentary system absolutely will protect. It's your first line of defense. But it will also excrete. So it will excrete out of your body water, sodium, chloride, magnesium, so think salts, electrolytes, and sweat. Now within sweat, you can study a whole bunch of other different things in your sweat, but we're just going to keep that pretty simple for this crash course. Your integumentary system helps to maintain homeostasis within and due to the relationship with the environment. So for example, you've got your sensory nerve endings in your dermis, and it allows the body to detect things like pain, touch, temperature. And when it senses any of those things, your body responds to it. If it senses a temperature that's too hot, that will trigger your entire body to respond in a way like sweating to help cool yourself down, or to dilate your vessels to release some heat. And on the flip side, if you're really cold, your body starts to shiver to generate some heat. And it will also constrict those blood vessels to conserve heat as well. Your skin produces vitamin D and melanin, as I said, in response to UV radiation. This also helps to maintain internal homeostasis. So let's do a quick check on your understanding so far. The integumentary system plays a vital role in which of the following? Select all that apply. I'll give you 1 minute to think through your response. All right, the integumentary system plays a vital role in which of the following? Select all that apply. So your options are A, protection, B, movement, C, maintain homeostasis, or D, excretion. The correct answers here are A, C, and D. Skin is not directly in charge or a vital role in movement. That's going to be the job of your skeletal muscular systems working in tandem together. So we just discussed how your skin is that first line of defense. It's a protection for you. It helps to maintain homeostasis by sensing things around you and triggering your body to properly respond. And finally, it will excrete water, salts, sweat. So A, C, and D are your correct choices. So reviewing the integumentary system. It consists of hair, skin, nails, and glands. It serves to protect, excrete, and maintain homeostasis. It protects from pathogens. It moisturizes your body. Its nails protect the ends of your fingers and your toes. And for excretion, it gets rid of those water, salts, and electrolytes. And it maintains homeostasis with the environment by regulating temperature and producing vitamin D and melanin. Moving into now the endocrine system. With the endocrine system, this is going to regulate body functions by controlling hormones. The endocrine system has many working parts, but all of it has to do with releasing hormones. So all body systems are regulated by the endocrine system to some capacity. And look at all of the different ways in which the endocrine system is affiliated. It's a part of the stress and injury response, producing blood, sexual development, reproduction, growth, appetite, electrolyte balance, brain function, and even your sleep. The endocrine system is a huge part of what controls other body systems in your body. So the structures that make up the endocrine system are glands and organs that release hormones directly into the circulatory system. Because remember, circulatory system, big transportation highway system in the body. And it influences growth, metabolism, and mood. So some key structures we're going to talk about today in the endocrine system are the pancreas, the gonads, which is a sciencey term for ovaries and testes, the pituitary gland, the pineal gland, the hypothalamus, adrenal glands, the thymus, the thyroid, and the parathyroid. Let's break down each one of these to get a better understanding. The pancreas is located near the stomach, and its job is to regulate blood sugar. So it releases insulin, for example, to help regulate blood sugar. Your ovaries and testes produce hormones such as estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, all regulating reproduction and sexual development. And if I go through these kind of fast, these slides will be available to you. You should get them in an email. If you haven't checked your email already, I tried to send them out before you attended the webinar on Zoom. So you have access to these slides in case I go a bit fast. And if you don't have access to the slides, don't forget you can check out this video on YouTube and Facebook as well to go back through this at your own pace. All right, more structures in the endocrine system. The pituitary gland, aka also known as the master gland, because it controls other endocrine glands and it regulates growth and development. And you can find this gland located behind the nose, the base of the brain. The pineal gland is deep into the brain and it produces melatonin. Melatonin is going to help regulate sleep, not to be confused with melanin, which we just talked about in the integumentary system. Another structure is the hypothalamus. This is going to regulate the internal balance, such as like temperature, thirst, hunger, sleep. So hypothalamus maintains homeostasis is really what that's saying. But also the hypothalamus controls the pituitary. Even though the pituitary gland is the master gland, because it controls tons of other endocrine glands, the hypothalamus actually controls the pituitary. Don't forget that one. The adrenal glands can be found on top of or superior to the kidneys. They make cortisol and adrenaline in like a fight or flight, a response to stress. The thymus can be found above the heart, and it makes T cells necessary for the immune system. More on those T cells in the immune system section of this webinar. It's coming up. The thyroid gland is located in your neck, and it regulates metabolism, energy levels, and calcium levels. And then you've got the parathyroid. These glands, notice how they kind of are like surrounding the thyroid. They help to regulate calcium specifically in the blood. All right, questions 1 and 2. Oh, we can have a small moment of celebration. The answer is not revealed for you on question 2. Thank goodness. Question 1. Which of the following endocrine glands controls the pituitary gland, or that master gland? What controls that? Question 2. If somebody's body is not regulating glucose levels appropriately, what endocrine structure may not be functioning properly? You got 2 questions. I'll give you 2 minutes to think about your answers. All right, question number 1. Which of the following endocrine glands controls the pituitary gland, or that master gland? And that is the job of the hypothalamus, C. And I see lots of C choices from people on our chat. Awesome job. The hypothalamus will control the pituitary gland. So option A, the pineal gland, remember this produces melatonin. It will be a major factor in your sleep, but it doesn't control the pituitary gland. The thyroid gland regulates metabolism, among some other things, but mostly metabolism. It's not in control of the master gland by any means. Same goes for option D, the adrenal gland. This gland will kick in that fight or flight response when you're highly stressed, but it does not control the master gland itself, only the job of the hypothalamus. Question number 2, if somebody's body is not regulating glucose levels appropriately, what endocrine structure may not be functioning properly? And the correct answer is A, the pancreas. Remember, the pancreas is situated near the stomach, and it will release insulin, among some other hormones, but mainly insulin to help regulate your glucose levels. Option B, the pineal gland, again, produces melatonin, involved with sleep, not involved with blood glucose levels. Option C, the parathyroid, regulates calcium in the blood, so calcium, but not glucose. And D, the gonads regulate sexual development, does not regulate glucose. So good job to those who chose option A. The endocrine system, through all of the use of hormones, helps to maintain homeostasis. And we've talked about homeostasis before, but it's maintaining a stable internal environment through what we call feedback loops. And they use receptors or sensors to detect those changes. So think of the nervous system with those receptors and sensors. Once that change is detected, it sends it to the control center, which is going to be the brain and those other endocrine glands in the area. And it will process those signals and it will determine the best response for your body. And then the effectors kick in. These are the things that actually carry out the response to restore balance. And that cycle can either be a positive feedback loop or a negative feedback loop. And what I mean by that is this: positive enhances. You need more of something. Think of like you've skipped breakfast. You've got low blood sugar. You might feel a little queasy, a little dizzy. Your glucose is low. And so your body sends and receives and carries out effectors to respond and restore that balance, to raise your glucose levels back up, because you probably have some reserve glucose fuel stored somewhere. So let's release that, bring your blood sugar back up. On the flip side, a negative feedback loop, it's the opposite. You got too much and you need to reduce, decrease, diminish those levels in order to restore and get yourself back into homeostasis. So it's always going to be one of those two, positive or negative, always happening to keep your internal environment stable. Moving into the urinary system. The urinary system's job is also to maintain homeostasis. You could argue every single one of your systems in your body is to maintain homeostasis. But here's what that looks like for the urinary system specifically. It's going to excrete. In fact, the urinary system is also known as the excretory system because its job is to excrete things like water, salt, and other waste. And of course, it depends on and affects other body systems, like the skeletal system. The urinary system removes waste from your bones, while in return, the bones protect and support the urinary system. There's a cause and effect relationship with the cardiovascular system and the urinary system, because there's a heavy blood supply present in your urinary system to help filter the blood. And the digestive system also plays a role. The urinary system removes salts, water, and other waste from the digestive system, but your digestive system provides nutrients needed for cell respiration and energy that the urinary system functions off of. The structures involved in the urinary system are the kidney, the ureter, the bladder, and the urethra. The kidneys maintain fluid homeostasis and filters waste in your blood. It helps make active vitamin D, and it's found in your dorsal lower back location. Remember that term dorsal, like a dorsal dolphin fin. It's on your backside. So think backside, lower back. That's where you would feel kidney pain if you had any. The ureters, notice how in our picture here, they connect to the kidneys. The ureters are a long tube, and you got two of them, and they transport urine from the kidney down into the bladder. And the bladder holds your fluid waste. What's cool about the bladder, it's made up of transitional epithelium, which just means it can transition, it can stretch. And thankfully, it does that, because if you've ever had to hold your waste, you can thank your bladder and its ability to stretch, to hold it until you're ready to release it. And that waste, that fluid waste, would be released out of your body through the urethra. We talked about that in the reproductive system. It connects to your bladder, to the outer portion of your body, carrying that urine. The basic component of a kidney is known as a nephron. And when you look at this picture, this blown up picture of a small portion of a nephron, it's a whole bunch of tubes, to put it very simply. And these tubes help to maintain pressure, and it uses that pressure to remove waste such as salts, ammonia, urea, glucose, etc. So when we talk about kidneys filtering your blood, it's using pressure to remove all of those things, among others, from your blood. But it will also reabsorb water and any kind of leftover nutrients that are circulating in the circulatory system. Now, whatever waste is left over, it goes to the ureters for you to excrete out of your body. So let's check in on your understanding so far. What is the correct term for removing metabolic waste from the body? This is also another name for the urinary system. Give yourself 1 minute to respond. The correct answer for removing metabolic waste from the body is excretion. Remember how I said the urinary system is also known as the excretory system. So, excrete means to expel or to get rid of. That's exactly what you're doing when you're removing the metabolic waste from your body. Therefore, option A, respiration, is not correct. Respiration, remember, is gas exchange, a totally different body system. Option B, circulation, moves blood, and it does play a role in the excretory system, but it is not overall a system that's in charge of removing waste. And option D, digestion, is also incorrect. Digestion breaks down food and drink, but it is not in charge of removing all forms of metabolic waste. It will remove like food particle waste, but remember with the urinary system, we're talking about waste like urea, for example, some metabolic waste, urea, carbon dioxide, creatine. These are all things that are byproducts of cellular processes, and this is what's excreted from your urinary system. All right, let's review the urinary system. The urinary system is for excreting waste and maintains fluid concentration and pressure homeostasis in your body. It's made up of your kidneys, the ureters, your bladder, urethra. Kidneys are made up of millions of nephrons, which are a system of tubules for filtering blood. And all those filtrates leave the body through urine. All right, guys, we are doing so good on time. We've got 2 sections left in this crash course, and we're not even quite to noon yet. So we're gonna probably finish just over noon. We're making good pace though. Let's keep going. The immune system. Brief overview. Think of the immune system like a defense army for your body, with multiple lines of defense that protects your body from bacteria, viruses, and other pathogens. And so the first line of defense is going to make up your innate defense. Think innate, natural. Don't really have to think about it. It's innate. The first line of defense, that immediate protection from physical or chemical barriers. Remember how we talked about your skin, first line of defense against pathogens. So that would be an example here of a physical barrier. The second line of defense that kicks in then are your immune cells or inflammation or a fever. Remember, a fever is going to inhibit the growth of pathogens, and inflammation sends signals to immune cells to get into that area and start doing their job. And then if a pathogen still gets through that second line of defense, you've got a third line called adaptive defense. And this is specific, long-lasting protection because it activates very specific immune cells called B and T cells. And these cells will produce antibodies, developing an immunological memory, meaning that if you ever encounter this again, your body remembers it. And it's got antibodies for it and hopefully can fight it off much more efficiently the next time. Oops, clicked 2. All right, let's talk more about those B and T cells, a part of that adaptive immunity. Hold on, I just want to make sure I didn't click one too many slides. We're good. Those B cells are also known as, or going to produce lymphocytes, produced by your lymph. And it produces antibodies when it encounters very specific antigens. And these are foreign substances that trigger your immune system. Your body says, hey, we notice something that's foreign that shouldn't be here. This could be a problem. And so these B cells will produce antibodies that will mark those pathogens for destruction. It's like putting a red flashing light on them saying, hey, here he is, come take care of this, get rid of it. That's the job of the B cells. Your T cells, there's different kinds of T cells. So one is the cytotoxic T cells, and these recognize those antigens, and these will actually induce those cell death. So notice how the B cells don't carry out destruction. They just mark them for destruction. But the T cells will induce cell death. Memory T cells remain in the body, and it allows for an effective response if that pathogen should return. And helper T cells will help activate other cells that will kill by releasing those cytokines. So T cells will actually get the job done when it comes to destroying those pathogens. But you've got lots of different types of cells in your immune system that work together and communicate and signal so that it can destroy that pathogen efficiently. When it comes to acquiring immunity, there are two ways in which the body can get immunity. There's passive immunity and active immunity. Passive immunity involves the transfer of antibodies from an outside source. So this is not your body producing it all on its own. You had to rely on an outside source to get that immunity. Now, this type of immunity is typically, it's very quick, but it is short-term protection. So for example, a baby in mom's utero, the mom is able to pass antibodies to that child. But as soon as that baby is out of the womb, eventually it will no longer carry those antibodies for long. Another example, let's say you get a snake bite and you get some sort of antibody injection. It's immediate, it helps to reduce the effects from the snake bite, but it's short-term protection. You don't have a immunity to that snake bite for the rest of your life. On the opposite side of things then is your active immunity, and this involves the stimulation of your immune system to produce its own antibodies and its own memory cells. And since you're activating memory cells, this type of immunity is long-lasting. So ways you can get active immunity. You're exposed to an infection. This is a natural occurrence. Maybe you're exposed to a staph infection or strep throat, for example. So you acquire natural antibodies to help fight that off. Or you can get a vaccination, which is an artificial form of getting those antibodies. But still, you're getting a diminished or completely denatured protein. Your body recognizes it, makes its own antibodies, and has lasting memory of it, so it can fight it back in the future. The immune system is going to be highly regulated and affect other body systems, such as the circulatory system. It will transport immune cells and antibodies, and it facilitates all inflammatory response. So the circulatory system is absolutely essential for your immune system to be able to function. The lymphatic system produces and matures lymphocytes. It will also filter those pathogens and helps to remove the waste. Your skeletal system houses bone marrow for white blood cell production. We didn't talk about that in this skeletal system crash course, but you could definitely find more information on that on more of our on-demand videos. But the skeletal system does produce blood cells, and that's necessary for your immune system. The integumentary is that first line of defense. It's a physical barrier. All right, one more topic with the immune system is autoimmune disease. And an autoimmune disease is when the body attacks its own tissues. It recognizes its own body as something foreign, something to fight and break down and get rid of. Normally, there are mechanisms in place to prevent that from happening, but there are several contributing factors that can lead to autoimmune disease. One being genetics. Some people are just more susceptible, or they inherit an autoimmune disease from someone in their family. The environment. You can get infections from the environment. The environment has toxins. There's so many things in our environment that can trigger an autoimmune response, typically in people who are already genetically predisposed. And then finally, hormones. Hormones that are not being regulated properly triggers an autoimmune disease to pop up in some individuals. All right, let's check in. What is the key difference between passive and active immunity? Take that full minute to read through all options. All right, guys, I know that was a lot of reading for 1 minute, but it is 1 minute for one question. So what is the key difference between passive and active immunity? And the correct answer is D, which so many of you chose that I see. Remember, passive is quick and it's short. It's that immediate protection, like a response to a snake bite, while active is long lasting. So let's talk about why the other options are not correct. Option A is incorrect because passive is not acquired through vaccines. That's active immunity. Option B is incorrect because passive immunity relies on an outside source to give those preformed body antibodies, whereas active stimulates that antibody production within the body itself. And then option C is incorrect for a very similar reasoning to B. It's just like the two terms are flip-flopped for the reasonings. All right, we're gonna keep moving. Let's review immune systems. And then we only have one more unit left. We're making not too bad a time. We'll finish afternoon just a bit, but that's okay for those who want to stick around. The immune system is the person's defense mechanism. Think of it as like your army. There are multiple lines of defense. The innate response is going to be made up of the first and second lines of defense. Remember, it's the physical and chemical barriers, followed by fevers, inflammation, activation of immune cells. And if those two lines don't work, your body relies on the third line of defense, which is adaptive, and that's calling in the B and T cells. And you can gain immunity through two routes: passive immunity, which is using an outside source, typically short term, or an active immunity, which is producing your own antibodies from within, and it is long term. It impacts and relies on other body systems, and your immune system can fail to recognize itself, which can lead to autoimmune diseases. All right, for those sticking around, our last topic is the skeletal system. So your skeletal system can be broken down into four main bone types. They are long bones, which they're long because they're typically longer than wide, and they help to support. So think like your limbs, your arms and your legs, lots of long bones making up your limbs. You have short bones, which are typically the same length and width. You can find short bones in your wrist, for example. Flat bones are thin, flat, and protects vital organs. Think of like your sternum, right in between, or like right in the medial line of your chest. If you feel that thin, flat bone there. And then irregular bones. They just don't really fit into any category. Think of your vertebrae, how weirdly shaped those bones are. So we would call those irregular. When we look at your bones at a microscopic level, we see a very intricate system. And so I've got visuals to help us out with this over here on the right. But some major structures that make up your compact bone on that microscopic level are as follows. The periosteum. This is the outer surface of your bones. Okay, so you're going to find that it covers the surface of your bones, not in the joints though. Just want to clarify that. Now, you're also going to have many osteons. Notice in our visuals, one entire darkened circle here is labeled osteon. These are tiny, tightly packed cylinders, which is the functional unit of bone. The matrix is going to be in between all of those cylinders. And the matrix is just minerals and collagen that fills those spaces. You have another structure called the lacunae. The lacunae are these cave-like spaces scattered throughout the matrix where you would find bone cells, osteocytes. Okay, cytes meaning cells, oste referring to bone. So osteocytes are bone cells. So look in our pictures. In the top right picture, they're like dark gray cave spaces. Or in our bottom left picture, they're the pink spaces. Those are the lacunae, and that's where you'd find those osteocytes. Also within osteons though, you have a Haversian canal. So these run right down the middle of your osteons. And notice in the top right picture, in the middle of each osteon, there's three colors. There's like I think it's a blue, a red, and a yellow. These components make up the Haversian canal, and this is where you would find blood and nerves for nutrient and waste removal. So this at the microscopic level is the tissue that is making up all of your compact bone in your skeletal system. So bones form in order to maintain homeostasis, but bones also break down and degrade in order to maintain homeostasis. And this ensures strength and function of your overall skeletal system. So the the cell types that are involved with bone building and bone destroying are osteoblast and osteoclast, respectively. So you can remember osteoblast because it builds, blast builds. Osteoblast will build your bone, and this helps for growth and repairing. But then you also have osteoclasts at work, and they destroy bone. And this is good when your bones have been degraded or they've been broken and they need repaired. So your osteoclast kind of takes away the degraded, broken parts, makes room for the osteoblast to come in and build that bone back up. Let's take a moment to talk about bone joints, because this is where bone unites with bone. We call it a joint, where bone unites with bone. So they meet up. Not to be confused with ligaments, where a bone attaches to another bone. That's a ligament, and that will, like I said, it attaches to one bone and the other end of the ligament attaches to another bone. When it comes to joints, it's just where one bone buddies up next to another bone. That's a joint. Some joints are movable and some joints are fixed. So what I mean by that, movable speaks for itself, right? Look at that ball and socket example on the right. It moves around. It allows your arms and your knees and your hips to move, right? I should say the hinge also is your knee joint. Ball and socket would be like your shoulder. Hinge would be your knee or your elbows, for example. But anyway, they're all movable. But some joints are fixed, meaning that you can't move them. So you've got joints in your skull. We call them sutures. And parts of your skull you're not able to move and pull apart, thankfully, because it's there for protection for your brain. But they are joints nonetheless, and they are fixed. They cannot be moved. You have articulating surfaces on the ends that are covered in cartilage to help reduce any friction that comes from being able to move around on one another. And you may even have some fluid in joints. This would be like the synovial joint. Your knee has fluid to help lubricate that joint too. So not only is there cartilage, but some joints also have fluid. Think of joints that are going to experience the most movement. We want to reduce that friction. All right, let's check your understanding for a moment. Bones attach to other bones using which structure? Give yourself 1 minute to respond. Okay, bones attach to other bones using which structure? The correct answer is B, ligaments. Bone attaches to one another. So to help you remember this, think about the ligaments around your knee. So your femur has to be able to connect to and work with your bottom long bones, which is like your tibia and your fibula. And so you've got your knee right in the middle of those, right? And so attaching from one bone to another are 4 ligaments in and around your knee: your ACL, your LCL, your PCL, your ACL. I don't remember did I repeat one? ACL, PCL, LCL, MCL. Those are your 4. It helps attach one bone to another. Those are ligaments, okay? So option A, Tendons are incorrect. Tendons attach bone to muscle. Option C is incorrect. A lot of people I see chose C in the chat. Joints are just a meeting ground where bones buddy up near one another, but they're not attaching through a joint. Okay, think back to that knee. It's an area where your femur and your tibia and your fibula all come together in that joint, but they're not directly attached through a joint. It's just a neighboring, a neighborhood. They're just next to each other. And finally, option D is incorrect. Cartilage can line those articular surfaces to help reduce friction, but it's not how bone attaches to another bone. So option B, ligament, is correct. A lot of people confuse ligament, tendons, and joints. So maybe that's just something that you all need to continue to just review and get those terms down. This was a quick turnaround anyway. All right, the skeletal system will work in tandem with your muscles in order to create movement. So as we just talked about in our question on the previous slide, muscles connect to bones via tendons. And the nervous system is going to signal to those muscles when to contract. And since those muscles connect to bone, if those muscles shorten or if they relax, that causes the bone that it's attached to move in a certain way. And so through the skeletal system, connecting to all kinds of muscles, you are able to create movement. All right, we're reviewing our last topic, the skeletal system. There are 4 types of bone in the skeletal system: long bones, short bones, flat bones, and irregular bones. Compact bone is made up of many osteons and a matrix, which contributes to the overall strength of your bones. Osteoblasts build bone, while osteoclasts destroy and reuse those bones to maintain your bone health. Joints are where bone meets up with a neighboring bone. Some move, some joints don't move. And bones have a close relationship with muscles, which allows for movement. All right, guys, we made it through our long-awaited A&P crash course. Thank you for joining me. This was my first webinar, everybody. So I hope you enjoyed it. I have learned to go through my slides, double check all those check marks so that I don't reveal those answers to you prematurely. Thank you so much for being here. And just a quick few reminders on some things. Remember, here at Archer, we offer so much more for you as a learner to get the most that you can to prepare for your TEAS test. So consider signing up. You'll have access to a huge question bank. You have on-demand videos. I've referenced those multiple times. We go way more in depth. Find us on socials, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and even set up some tutoring if you need to, either one-on-one or in a small group. Speaking of tutors, here's the faces of our educators for the TEAS. So we've got math support, reading and English support, and science support. So feel free to contact any one of us using a QR code here. Sign up for a slot that works for you and your schedule. And then finally, don't forget to take our feedback survey. I would love to know how I can improve for you guys so that you guys can learn to the best of your abilities. Also kind of let me know on pacing, how you think that went. Was it too fast, too slow, or just right? And don't forget, there's a link for these webinars. I see lots of people asking for a link to these webinars. You can watch this webinar back again through Facebook or on YouTube. Perfect. So don't forget to fill out that survey. People are asking if there's a link to the slides. Yeah, there is a way for you to get a hold of these slides. For one, make sure to register for our webinars on Zoom Some of us instructors provide our slides ahead of time. So when you get a reminder email like, hey, later today's your webinar, I attach my slides so you have them ahead of time. So maybe you can download them, annotate on them, you're prepared. But also, if you registered on Zoom, you will get a follow-up email. Okay, so check your emails after this and you will get the slides sent to you in your email that way too, just in case you missed the pre-register or the pre-webinar email. All right, guys, thank you so much for sticking around 20 minutes past noon. I think we did pretty good on timing. So again, thanks for being here, and I hope you found it meaningful for you. And keep an eye out for future A&P webinars and other science webinars. We've got more coming for you. All right, have a great Tuesday, everybody. Enjoy your day.